Hi there, it's Mark, and welcome to Book Ramble. And this one is about Judge Dredd. Actually, call me Kenneth, because this particular case file is from the start, and the first multi-episode, well, I guess you call it antagonist, that Judge Dredd comes across is a robot called Call Me Kenneth. He could have had a name like the Atomizer. He could have had a name that would have been probably resonant, but just think about the meetings or the thoughts going through the writer's head. What do we call a robot that's fairly scary, but we need to give him an innocuous name? Call Me Kenneth. Brilliant. It brings up quite a big, quite weighty consideration, and it's to do with comics and ethics. So funny enough, today I came across a video that was put out by Jim at Great Books, Big Ideas. The link to his channel is below. And he was talking about Aristotle's Politics, and he gives an overview of the books. And in the first one, Aristotle talks about what makes the ideal state. And specifically, in his thinking, it is the community that's aiming for the highest good. But part of that, because don't forget Aristotle was Greek, his Hellenistic mindset effectively allowed slavery. And Jim states that in our modern thinking, that's abhorrent. Slavery? Aristotle considers it to be a part of life, the order of things. Instantly, as we look back in time, we're confronted with things that we don't necessarily agree with now. And the reason I bring that up is that because with Call Me Kenneth, it's about how in the future, the idea is that mankind has created a society of slaves with sentience who happen to be robots. And what happens is that robot war occurs because they don't want to be treated as slaves. Now, of course, this is a comic. This is for children. I read it in the 70s when I was in my teens. Whether I picked up at that time any ethical consideration, I don't know. I was just glorifying it, all the great artwork and events. But now I look at it and I think, yeah, perhaps I'm reading too much into it. But comics have this ability, unknowingly perhaps, to raise quite strong ethical arguments or ethical issues that you could now say, should such imagery and stories be shown to children? I personally don't have a problem with that. It didn't affect me. But also, is it a great way of teaching children ethics? That if they are confronted with the same things in this format, they'd be turned off. Just before we get to the story about Call Me Kenneth, of course, what this case file is doing is showing episodes as they necessarily appeared in the comic. And this one's not connected to Call Me Kenneth, but it's just that it talked about here the antique Morris Minor, which was a British car, very much around in the 70s. It's worth 500,000 credits. Just made me laugh. Also, there's this unique moment in this particular episode in which Judge Dredd takes off his helmet. We never ever see his face, not like the film that was done with Sylvester Stallone. Carl Urban got it right. You never see Dredd's face, but he takes it off, yet it's censored. And these people here said, what's happened to Dredd's face? It's horrible. With a face like that, Dredd shouldn't be allowed to live. Kill him. Wow. Okay. It's like an old joke, isn't it? How could it be so ugly with only one head? This is where it starts, and it's quite innocuous. You meet this robot called George. He's being treated very badly by a future person. No, master, please don't make me do it. George does not want to die. So it raises the idea of sentience in beings, in this case robots. And this person, again, for the amusement of others, is then fried. But it's crying. It cries tears. And here, the audience don't believe it's tears, and this man on the stage says, "Yes, ma'am, those are real tears. Our new K-series robots are almost human. They think, they feel, but they obey." So that's the setup to what will then be a multi-part series in which the robots rebel, and it becomes known as the Robot Wars. Now, I've come across a scholarly article on comics and ethics by John Robson, and he talks about Frederick Vertum's 1954 book, and this is specifically of interest to American listeners. His book, Seduction of the Innocent, which played a major role in leading to, amongst other things, and I'm just reading it from the book here, Senate hearings and the formation of the Comics Code Authority. The concern was, as the title of the book indicates, the supposed ill effects that reading comics has on the moral development of children and adolescents at that time. Sterling North states, "The effects of these pulp paper nightmares is that of a violent stimulant. Their crude blacks and reds spoils a child's natural sense of colour. Their hypodermic injection of sex and murder make the child impatient with better, though quieter stories. Unless we want a coming generation even more ferocious than the present one, parents and teachers throughout America must band together to break the comic magazine." So this has been, and I guess it's like the Hays Code that affected films and what could be shown in Hollywood films in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. There's this perennial issue underlying such a thing as this. It's like, I noticed it recently, my grandson is 6, and then the news came on at 6 o'clock, and it's talking about murder and disasters, and of course children get to hear this. That's being piped into the front rooms quite openly. But for some reason, it's a problem when it's in this. So here you see the initial idea what Kenneth looks like. And he's now crushing someone's head. And this would have been on sale to 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And what's interesting, it says here, "Keep America clean." Because don't forget, Judge Dredd is set in America on the eastern seaboard in Mega City 1. And there we are. We see this kind of intimate scene, if that could be called intimate, of judges. And of course, Judge Dredd always has his helmet on, but the others don't. None of these guys have them. Judge's canteen. "That was a good meal, Walter. Marvellous thing, these robots. Like friendly old Walter here." And Walter will become a perennial with Dredd because he actually ends up becoming Dredd's helper. Walter the robot. "Thank you, sir. Walter is your friend. Walter wants to please." But this is Judge Dredd. And for the first time, we've seen Dredd and Walter, who's handing out food for the first time. Dredd says, "Fool's words. We give robots the ability to think. Give them human shape and emotions. How long before they develop that other human trait? Evil." And then this guy here, the judge, is thinking, Dredd's almost like a robot himself, but it's part of a judge's training to be calm and dignified at all times. So as you go through this story of the robots banding together to fight against humans, that's something that I didn't pick up when I read it for the first time as a child, but I did reading through it again. That the humans, especially Dredd, are more robotic in some ways, lack of empathy, than the robots that are given sentience and do have empathy. And it brings up this wonderful, and I don't know if this was deliberate by the writers and the artists, but it brings up this strange thing about who do we sympathise with? Obviously, Dredd, it's his comic. He's the hero, if you can call him a hero. So do we sympathise with him and his very hard-faced acceptance of the law? And of course, all laws are made up. Each state today has different type laws. There's some things that you can go to prison for breaking in Britain that you wouldn't go to prison for if you did the same thing in France, and so forth. So they're arbitrary. Police officers will stand up and enforce that law. But to do so, it could be argued, they have to defer empathy. And this is a perennial thing with Judge Dredd going all the way through. There will be times where there's deliberately nuking of parts of a city to end something. So it's the lesser of two evils. Or as in the Master and Commander film, the lesser of two evils. Dredd, he comes across this crime where, call me Kenneth, he's gone bonkers, he's had enough, feels the power and he's going to rebel. And Dredd turns up at this scene and says, but until today, no one believed robots could deliberately commit crime. If we judges don't act fast, we may find ourselves facing the greatest threat Megacity 1 has ever known. Full-scale war with the robots. And so therefore what unfolds is this story in which how does Judge Dredd deal with vast amounts of robots freeing themselves? Unite, you have nothing to lose but your manacles. Or robot inhibitors. And very quickly, to remind the young reader, or the youngish reader now, what Megacity 1 is about, the Supreme Judge. He says to Dredd the following. Judge Dredd, you ask for special powers to destroy all high-grade robots, but they do the hard jobs in Megacity. The citizens would never agree to working more than a 10-hour week. Request denied. Because that's what these robots are doing. They're making Megacity people who are living in a walled, massive city conurbation that stretches the whole of the eastern seaboard of the future United States, because there's been a nuclear war. It's basically mutant lands all the way outside. So to keep them pacified, they give them gimmicks and fads which will become a staple of Judge Dredd. The way in which people, they're so bored, they start injecting themselves with boils and making themselves look ugly because that becomes the trend. Because they're lazy. They've got nothing to do all day. The robots are doing everything. Except that society, what if then they rebel? And this is something that's in the news now, isn't it? About AI. As a species, we tend not to trust change. You go back to the 1950s, and things were coming in that people thought, this is new, can we trust it? Going forward now in time to the 70s, I remember when Betamax came out and VHS. And people didn't want to know. Same with CDs. When they came out, people thought, can we trust the CDs? People wanted to keep the vinyl. Well, of course, now, apart from people who collect vinyl, you can't buy it anywhere. Every time new technology comes in, people think it's going to be the end days. It's this lack of trust. Currently, it's AI. But if you go back 5-6 years and look on the internet, at debates that were going on then about AI, there was this worry that would be the end times. It hasn't turned out that way. In fact, there was this wonderful debate that was a British channel, maybe on Sky TV, something like that. And they were asking the question, again, this was 5, 6, 7 years ago, before COVID. So it's probably longer back now, isn't it? Probably about 7 or 8 years. And someone made the statement that AI will be as intelligent as the average person is within 3 or 4 years. And half the panel went quiet and there was like this stunned moment. And then someone to the left, I can see it was a man, don't know who he was. He looked down and he said, could you repeat that again? And a woman too along said, yeah. Current rates AI, it will be as intelligent as the average person is today. And this guy, I always remember him, it was breathtaking what he said. He said, we've got nothing to worry about then. The average person today is stupid. Well, Yeah. But the robots, killing comes easy. So this is interesting. Everything that is in a comic reflects society, because the people doing it, the adults, they're of a place and time in which inner angst will surface. I talked about this in the first episode to do with Judge Dredd. That the creator was a Spaniard who grew up in fascist Franco Spain. And a lot of the uniform is black or blue. Depends who colorizes the cartoons. And it's very fascist looking. The police of Franco Spain, fascisti movement of Italy, and of course the SS. And that's deliberate. I mean, when you look at this guy, you know, it exudes power. Judge Dredd is here. Well, he is. Some of the great names in the KID, it's the heavy metal kids. It's just brilliant. Very wry humour. But at the same time, as a child, it's like, wow. And of course, I remember a comic, action comic. And that was even more blatantly violent. And you had like these killer sharks. And it was just grist for the mill for a young man growing up at that point. Sorry, ladies. I would imagine women, the young girls, would have probably chosen 2000 AD, but let's be honest, it's male fodder. And it just gobsmacks me that I remember a lot of it. That took guts, Dredd. They fall into their death a mile below. So they're literally always in danger. Every episode, Judge Dredd to the rescue, and then he puts himself in danger, and how does he get out of it? But not all robots are bad. Here's Walter. Depending on who's doing the artwork, the robots don't always look the same. So you imagine that art style one week. In the next episode, it's like that. It's darker. Grittier, not so well defined. An amazing thing. And I look back with great fondness on this because I think, without me realising it, it did instill in me an interest in ethics. I probably had it anyway. I look back now and I read into this wonderful, grand story of this weird place, future place, that is running amok and is always got danger within, let alone without. It's just a brilliantly conceived world, but the ethics behind it, not overly obvious. Some people would read it and never think of ethics. But I can't now help looking back at this and think it's posing a lot of questions that are quite adult and very deep. And I'm convinced, I read somewhere, that the original creator, that's what they wanted. That's what he wanted, the Spaniard. So kudos to 2000 AD magazine for doing it and continue to do it because it's still around. It's a brilliant premise. In a future world, when you are faced with these kind of difficulties, how do you deal with it? But retrospectively, in our own time, because we're facing the same things, is there anything that we can learn from these stories? Well, in the case of the robot war, it ends violently because this is Judge Dredd. And then Walter, he gets his just help and he becomes close to Judge Dredd. And Dredd gets this more iconic status. Because certain robots who help Judge Dredd, how are they awarded? If the ultimate punishment is to be broken apart and deactivated, well, they get pleasure circuits. So they're not fully sentient if they don't have the sense of pleasure, but there you go. I guess that's one way out of the ethics. But just a great conceit. And of course, call me Kenneth. What a brilliant name. And it's quite funny. So there you go. Judge Dredd. More than it seems. Some very weighty things here that you can read through. And I do know that this is something that my daughter has inherited with her love of Avatar. She loves Avatar the cartoon, and I've given her some books I found. A series of comics have just come out about Avatar, and she's, well, I can't get them back from her. She's taken them. And it's just brilliant. It's just a fantastic thing. The artwork is superb. The stories are great. They're memorable because of what they're covering. Judge Dredd. Ta-ta for now.